You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to a special early morning edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and the reason I'm doing this as an early morning episode is because the NHL moved the Hurricanes-Bruins game to today at 11 a.m. So I can't post a podcast in the afternoon when there's already a game going on. By the time you listen to it, the game's going to be old hat, and you're going to say, why didn't Jacob talk about the game? So if I do it now, it negates that. I also want to be able to watch the game without needing to focus on anything else. When I'm watching a sporting event, I like to give it my full attention. I'm on Twitter sometimes during the game at RealJacobValk, but not all the time. I just like to get really invested in the game. I can't do that while I'm editing. So that's why you're getting an early morning episode. You can listen to this on your commute to your office as opposed to from your office. I really think that this is the right way to do today's show, and only today's show. Obviously, the reason that the Hurricanes-Bruins game was postponed by something like 15 hours was that the Blue Jackets and Lightning played the fourth longest game in NHL history. And that is no exaggeration. Quintuple overtime. Both goalies standing on their head. Andrei Vasilevsky with 61 saves. Joonas Korpisalo with 85 saves. Your heart has to break for Korpisalo. This is a guy who made save after save after save, set the NHL record for saves in a single game. And he sees one of his defensemen, it was either Kukan or Gavrikov, I think it was Kukan, block a shot. It goes right into Braden Point's wheelhouse, and he just rips a quick wrister by Korpisalo. I mean, there's nothing Korpisalo can do there. But your heart has to break for him. Whoever the losing goalie was. Vasilevsky would have been the same thing. I can say this with a high degree of confidence. Joonas Korpisalo did not go to bed easily after that game. I mean, he's going to be tossing and turning, thinking about, oh, I made 85 saves. Why couldn't I make one more? Why couldn't I stop the first Braden Point goal? Why couldn't I stop the Yanni Gourde goal? Your heart has to break for Korpisalo because he didn't deserve to lose this game. Neither team deserved to lose this game. This was one of the greatest games in NHL history. This is why the Stanley Cup playoffs are the best playoffs in sports. Where else do you get quintuple overtime? Where else do you get games where you're sitting on the edge of your seat knowing that just one goal is all it takes Basketball, you don't have that. You have that back and forth. The NHL has that sudden death element. I mean, it's funny, there were some people saying that the games shouldn't go that long. There should be either 3-on-3 at some point or a shootout. Look, I understand the argument. I mean, let's take today, for example. Canucks Blues is going to start at 10:30. Blue Jackets Lightning took over 6 hours. If that was the Canucks Blues game, that game would be over at 4:30. I mean, no one's staying up for that. The players are going to be dead. I understand that part of it, and I don't mind the idea of after one, you go to a 3-on-3 or a shootout. But don't take anything away from this game. This was a 3 o'clock start. It ended at about 9:30-ish. There was no excuse to not watch that. I watched every second of that game, and I was into it. And you know what? It's not going to stop me from watching hockey today. Or the day after, or the day after, or the day after. Don't tell me that this wasn't good, that we had quintuple overtime. I'm with you that there should be a way to shorten it, but don't say that because of this game. Say that because you don't want to stay up for the Western Conference games. I understand that. I can respect that. I can't respect it for the Blue Jackets Lightning game. But this was an incredibly even game, a great game, a fantastic game. A game that's going to live on throughout the history of the Blue Jackets and the Lightning. Just like the Easter Epic lives on throughout the Islanders and Capitals histories. Same thing with Blue Jackets Lightning now. I mean, the list of records that were set in this game runs about a mile long. You have the record for most saves in a game set by Korpisalo, 85. 151 combined shots, the most in an NHL game. Seth Jones had 65 minutes and 6 seconds of ice time. That is more than one NHL game. That's a record. Obviously, both teams have their opportunities to win, and that's what's going to keep a lot of the Blue Jackets up at night. Vasilevsky, even in regulation, had to sprawl across the crease to make a fantastic save. And even in overtime, he had to make some. I mean, this was about as even of a hockey game as you'll ever see. This is one of the greatest hockey games in history. But a couple things that caught my eye during the game. Obviously, Victor Hedman did play. I didn't think he would, but I give him credit for persevering. He played well. He had an assist. He was a +1. He actually tied for the lead in shots with 9. He was tied with Braden Point. And that was for both teams. I mean, Hedman was all over the ice making plays. 57 minutes and 38 seconds he was on the ice. That's the third most in the game behind Jones and Zach Werenski. And the longest out of any Lightning player. This is a guy who we didn't know if he was going to play or not. And he plays over 57 minutes. That's a Herculean effort. Give Victor Hedman all the credit in the world. I wonder if Cooper would have dressed him if he knew this game was going to go into quintuple overtime. Also, the Lightning did a fantastic job of really not letting the Blue Jackets get any opportunities in close on Vasilevsky. The Dubois goal started off as a Texier shot that deflected twice, and the Bjorkstrand goal was just a crazy angle. I mean, that's a shot that the Lightning will give up. And Vasilevsky should be expected to stop that. I thought the Lightning had a great defensive game plan. Really good zone D. I mean, that was picture perfect. Force bad shots. You can't do much better than that. Moving on now to Flames Stars, the forgotten game. The Flames Stars game started after the Blue Jackets Lightning game started and ended before the Blue Jackets Lightning game ended. Just think about that for a minute. I mean, unless you're a Flames fan or a Stars fan, there's no way you were watching that game. I mean, I'm sorry. I was not watching this game. Alright, I'll be honest. I just wasn't. I was glued into quintuple overtime. I mean, come on. How often do you see that? Look, I'll say a couple quick things about it. I'm not going to go too in-depth. It's really impressive that the Flames were able to get production from guys who you wouldn't expect. Dylan Dubé had 2 goals, and Rasmus Andersson had the game winner. That was really impressive. Also, Milan Lucic, from what I heard, played really well. So he's keeping up his Fountain of Youth style play. That's really good to see. I like Lucic. He plays the game the right way. It's funny, there were talks about when he was a free agent that the Islanders were going to go after him. It looked like that was a bad contract for a while, but now it's looking pretty good. Also, Jamie Benn showed up in this game. He got a goal. It was the game-tying goal. Physically, he didn't make too much of an impression. He only had 2 hits. But the Stars did have guys who did get hits. Jamie Oleksiak and Blake Como. So everything that I said about the Stars was true. I just didn't see guys like Doobie and Anderson being the Flames' only goal scorers. Believe it or not, I actually know a little bit about sports. But again, I wasn't watching this game, so I really can't go into it too much. Speaking of me knowing a lot about sports, I said that Blackhawks Golden Knights was going to be a romp. The Blackhawks would have no chance. And I was right. My God, are the Blackhawks terrible. They are about as bad can be. They may be the worst playoff team I've ever seen. I mean, I'm trying to think. The 7-9 NFL teams that win their division and make the playoffs, they have a tendency to win those wildcard games. Remember the Beastquake run by Marshawn Lynch against the Saints? The Seahawks went 7-9 in the regular season that year. In the NBA, Lionel Hollins, his first year with the Nets, they made the playoffs. They weren't a great team. I mean, they took the Hawks to 6 games that year, but they weren't great. In 2015, the Yankees backed into the playoffs. And by backed into the playoffs, I mean hit the curb, hit the car behind them, and ran over a puppy to get into the playoffs. They were destroyed by Dallas Keuchel. I've talked about that game before. Thank God I got sick for it. I don't think any of those teams that I just mentioned are as bad as this Blackhawks team. You can tell that they're lost. You can tell they're not a good team. They shouldn't be there. I actually feel bad for them in a sense. Because they're not ready for this. This isn't their time. And now they're getting embarrassed in an international spotlight? My God. I mean, the Golden Knights weren't even that good. They weren't bad by any stretch, but they weren't great. I've seen the Golden Knights play better than how they played yesterday. The Blackhawks were just abysmal. There's no nice way to say it. They're not a good hockey team. They're just not. I mean, the one thing I'll say in their defense is that their only goal yesterday, the David Kampf goal, was the most impressive goal of that game. Really good job of forechecking on the penalty kill by Brandon Saad. He forced Shea Theodore to give up the puck. Saad with a beautiful pass to Kampf, and Kampf just sniped it past Lehner. Great goal. Best goal of the game. The Blackhawks needed to seize on that momentum, but they couldn't. They're just not a good team. And the two Riley Smith goals are two of the softest goals you'll ever see in your life. How does Corey Crawford let those goals through? That is inexcusable. Alright, if you're Jeremy Colleton and you want to try to win this thing, you gotta bench Crawford. You've got to start Malcolm Subban. I'm not a big Subban fan. I don't think he's that good, but you gotta try something. Unfortunately for them, I don't think anything's gonna get the job done unless we find a DeLorean and go back in time. Alright, now it's time to preview today's games. I'm not going to preview Hurricanes Bruins. I did it yesterday. If you want to hear that preview, listen to yesterday's podcast. I'll start with Islanders Capitals. For the Islanders, it's really simple. Keep up the great defensive play. Keep up the great power play. Keep up everything you've been doing. Even though the first line has been invisible for the most part, Barzal did wake up a little bit in Game 4, but Anders Lee has been terrible. They can still win this thing. Just play sound defensive hockey. And keep up the great power play. I mean, that's going to be tough because the Capitals have a great penalty kill, the 6th best penalty kill in the league, but Braden Holtby didn't have a great year this year. I still like Holtby. Alright, I don't want him to come off like I don't. But he went 1-2 in round-robin play. He didn't set the world on fire. He's beatable. I don't see any reason why the Islanders can't continue their great power play. And keep up the great defensive play. Alex Ovechkin has been invisible. I think the Islanders can keep him shut down. Maybe he'll have a goal here and there, but for the most part, I do expect the Islanders to shut him down. He was invisible in round-robin play. It's very possible that the Islanders can shut him down. In fact, I think they will shut him down. I don't think Ovechkin's going to have a lot of good moments in this series. And that plays into what the Capitals need to do to win this game. They've got to get Ovechkin cooking. Without Ovechkin, they're dead in the water. I mean, realize something. In the 3 round-robin games, they only scored 5 goals. You can't rely on guys like Richard Panik and Travis Boyd to get the job done. It has to be Ovechkin. The Islanders are a great defensive team. How do you expect players like Panik and Boyd to have good games? That doesn't work for me. It has to be Ovechkin. Also, from the physical side of things, I think the Capitals are a little better. Tom Wilson can drive you nuts. He has dirty moments, and I think he is a dirty player. But he's going to be out there a lot, more than the Islanders' fourth line. Watch out for him if you're the Islanders. You've got to make sure you keep your head up, you look behind you before you go into the corners. Don't let yourself be the victim of any bone-crunching hits. Moving on now to Coyotes Avalanche. The key for the Coyotes is to keep up their great offensive play. In the regular season, they were not a good offensive team. They have the 23rd best offense in the NHL when you look at goals per game. There are only 31 teams in the NHL. Shooting percentage, 27th best in the league. Shots on goal, middle of the pack. Power play percentage, middle of the pack. But in round robin play, they got their big guns cooking. Clayton Keller was a point-a-game player. Oliver Ekman-Larsson was a point-a-game player. I think I said this on Monday, but I'll say it again. Taylor Hall, point-a-game player. Phil Kessel, point-a-game player. Christian Dvorak and Derek Stepan both had 3 points. And Darcy Kemper looked okay. He didn't look great. You can't trust him 100%. He's not the best goalie in the world. He's not terrible, but he's not great. The Coyotes need to keep up their great offensive play. Because I don't think you're going to be able to shut down this Avalanche team. Nathan MacKinnon is too talented. Regardless of what you do, he's going to get his. Also, Nazem Kadri and Mikko Rantanen have had really good postseasons. So, those guys are going to get theirs no matter what. The Coyotes need to outshoot the Avalanche if they're going to win this game. It's just that simple. Philip Grubauer isn't that great. Pavel Francouz isn't that great. It has to be an offensive explosion. And everything that I just said for the Coyotes applies to the Avalanche. Like I said on Monday, this may not be a series that you're 100% invested in, but give it time. You have no excuse not to watch it. It's a 5:30 start. If you're home, no other sports on. Alright, watch this game. You want to tell me you care about Pacers-Rockets? That's a meaningless game. No one cares about the NBA right now, except the people interested in who's going to get that last playoff spot in the West. I mean, I've had a tough time getting into this restart in the NBA. Talk to me when the playoffs hit. This is going to be a really good series, really even series. I think it's going to be a great game to start off with. Look for an offensive explosion in this game. The over-under on this game is 5.5. Take the over. It will be at least a 4-3 game. Moving on now to Canadiens Flyers. And look, on paper, this is a mismatch. Carter Hart has been playing his ass off. And the Flyers dominated in round-robin play. They look like the best team in the NHL right now. But the Canadiens can win this game. And I'm going to tell you how. For starters, they've got to get their young guns going. I don't want to see Shea Weber, Paul Byron, and Jeff Petrie leading the way. I want to see Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Nick Suzuki leading the way. That's the future of the Canadiens. Those guys need to show up. Alright, now that they got a little bit of a taste of playoff hockey in the qualifying round against the Penguins, it's time for them to really show out against the better Pennsylvania team. Also, they have Carey Price, the hottest goalie in the NHL right now. The old adage is that all you need is a hot goalie and you'll go far in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Canadiens are going to test that. Carey Price received an onslaught of shots by the Penguins. It was an average of 33 a game. The Canadiens cannot allow that. Now it's going to be tough because the Flyers have a much more well-rounded attack than the Penguins did. Konechny, Couturier, Voracek, Giroux, Hayes, and JVR. But it can be done. There is a way for the Canadiens to win this game. It's tough. It's a lot easier said than done. But it is possible. As for the Flyers, Carter Hart needs to keep standing on his head. He needs to go toe-to-toe with Carey Price. Alright, it's just that simple. If it's a 4-1 final, I don't see Carey Price being on the losing end of that. I think it's more likely that it's Carter Hart. He's got to go toe-to-toe with this guy, and he can do it. He is incredibly talented. He's basically 22 years old. His birthday is tomorrow, so happy birthday, Mr. Hart. I mean, this is his first taste of playoff hockey, and he's been dominating. So, there's no reason that he can't keep it up. It's just now more important than ever. Matt Murray can blink. Tristan Jarry can blink. Carey Price, I don't see it. Also, that well-rounded Flyers offense that I talked about, they have to put pressure on the Canadiens. It's just that simple. Heavy forecheck, pepper Carey Price. You've got to try to beat him. And you've got to do it a lot. It's tough. It's really, really tough. But you have to get quality scoring chances and convert on them. Also, if you believe in do, you'll definitely pick the Flyers because those 6 guys that I just mentioned, none of them scored a goal in round-robin play. They got some big contributions from Scott Lawton and Nicholas Aube-Kubel. The Flyers need those 6 guys to contribute if they're going to beat Carey Price. It's just that simple. The last game is Canucks Blues. And the Canucks need to keep getting contributions from their guys. I mean, we all know who the best players on that team is. It's JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, Bo Horvat, Quinn Hughes, and Brock Besser. All of those guys showed up against the Wild. Those guys need to keep contributing. The Canucks really don't have the depth scoring necessary to make up for their absence. How much can you trust Jake Virtanen? How much can you trust Adam Gaudette? How much can you trust Antoine Roussel or Louis Eriksson or Jay Beagle? You just can't. Especially when they're going up against a goalie as great as Jordan Binnington. Jacob Markstrom also needs to keep standing on his head. Markstrom's a solid goalie. Make no mistake about it. He's not great, but he's solid. Very solid goalie. He's been playing out of his mind against the Wild. Now, the Blues are a much tougher opponent, but the Canucks showed that they have what it takes to be a tough team to beat in these playoffs. And let's face it, the Blues have not been great in round-robin play. They lose the heartbreaker to the Avalanche. They give up 6 goals to the Golden Knights, including 3 unanswered third-period goals, and they lose in a shootout to the Stars. And realize, it was Jake Allen that started in that shootout loss. Binnington got shellacked against the Golden Knights. Having said that, though, he's the defending starting goalie for a Stanley Cup winning team for a reason. He's still a great, great, great goalie. But like I said on Monday, this series is going to be closer than people think. As for the Blues, the biggest thing is just getting Jordan Binnington's head screwed on straight. Look, it's possible that Avalanche loss took a lot out of him. I mean, that was a tough loss. A millisecond later, that's not a goal. And that could take a lot out of you. But we know how talented this kid is. He's the seminal reason why the Blues won the Stanley Cup last year. They need to get him cooking, or else the Canucks are really going to give them a hard time. I'm telling you. I picked the Blues to win this series in 6 games, but if Binnington lays an egg, it wouldn't surprise me if the Canucks won this series. They're really talented. There is one more thing I want to talk about. It's a follow-up to yesterday with college football. The Big Ten and the Pac-12 are not going to play full sports. They're going to look to pick things back up in the spring. I didn't talk about spring seasons that much because I just don't think it's going to work. I just don't see that as a smart move. You're in essence saying that we need to have a vaccine and or great treatment for the coronavirus in 6 months. That's a tough ask. It's possible. It's certainly very possible, but it brings up other logistical challenges. Like, how are you going to guarantee that these guys get the vaccine? Or, if there's no vaccine, how are you going to guarantee that if these guys get the coronavirus, that they're going to get this magic panacea? Don't take anything for granted with healthcare in this country. Alright, it is a disaster. You don't need me to tell you that. Also, how are you going to do bowl games? What are you going to do? Have bowl games in, like, May or June? How's that going to work? More to the point, there are some college football conferences that are still trying to push through this. I think the SEC is going to try to push through this. The Big 12, I think, is going to try to push through this. How can you have bowl games? How can you have an NFL draft? I mean, when would that season end? A spring season. Let's say April. You'd have to move the draft back to the end of May. And then these guys don't have a lot of time to get acquainted with their new team. Whether it's the players or the playbook. Spring football, to me, just didn't make a lot of sense. I liked my all-star team idea. have the NFL Draft Advisory Board tell you what guys are most likely to get drafted, put those guys in bubbles, put them on all-star teams, and have those teams play each other a lot. I understand that it's not a perfect setup, but it's better than this. The logistics behind this are really, really tough. Is this better than plowing through a season now? I guess. It's possible that we get something done in regards to either treating the coronavirus or preventing the coronavirus by the time spring hits. But to me, this just feels like you're kicking the can down the road. I think there's a big possibility that this could blow up in these conferences' faces. And the fact that there are conferences doing one thing while other conferences are doing other things, to me, is ridiculous. Mark Emmert needs to show some leadership. Alright, get these guys functioning under one set of rules. That's why the All-Star bubble would have made sense. Everyone would have been on the same footing. But Mark Emmert wanted to pass the buck to the conferences. What a joke. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that this is what Rob Manfred, Roger Goodell, and Mark Emmert are saying. Let's go out onto the field and hope we all don't get killed.